You know, I mean, I think that a lot of the legislation that hasn't passed, that has been put up, has been good legislation. I think that the medical marijuana bill, for example, that came to the floor and then was voted down, was good legislation. There have been attempts at Medicaid expansion, which is good legislation. Overall, I think that my sister says we're the new Kansas. Overall, I think that this legislature currently focuses on bills that are really divisive and not helpful to Tennesseans.
Thank you, Mayor Campbell. Kimmy.
I would have to say that I have not seen legislation that I am particularly enamored with. There have been efforts. I will say that I was very happy to see that 2 Republican House members put forward a bill for Medicaid expansion in the last session. I was so impressed by that and so excited. And I think we're moving forward to a time where more and more Republicans are ready to get on board with this. They understand that it's not just a social justice issue. It's not just a humanitarian issue. It's really an economic issue. So they're finally starting to come on board, and I think we'll see that. I think that the COVID epidemic, the issues we're facing as we see people standing up and demanding that our government be more responsive, is going to cause people from both sides of the aisle to become more responsive. And I think they're having to accept that they can't just stand on their own choices. You know, we know that 63% of Tennesseans want Medicaid expansion. So these legislators, their constituencies want it. And so I think that they're moving in that direction. Quite frankly, I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful that we will move there as a legislature, as a state. And I'm hopeful that the activities that have been going on, the protests, the rallies, the sense of understanding of how important government is and what we can actually do to lift up one another and lift up all people, I'm getting a sense that that is really, we're on the verge of that happening. And so while in the past has not necessarily been something I found most helpful, I think that we are moving forward to a much more hopeful time.
Thank you, Kimmy.
Sure.
This next question is surrounding mail-in voting. So, is it feasible to move Tennessee to a mainly mail-in voting system after the pandemic if we see higher voter participation? Kimmy, please take this one first.
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm hopeful about some things. And I'm not sure that's one of them. It depends on how we go. So when I'm elected senator, or if I'm so honored by our constituencies and the constituencies of this district, I will work very hard to bring other Democrats on board, to help other Democrats be elected in districts across the state, so that we can have that. So that there will be enough people to vote for those things. Specifically, mail-in voting is very important. You know, I'm an Army wife, and we lived all over the world for 30 years. My husband was in the Army for 30 years, and we used mail-in voting everywhere we lived. We always voted in Tennessee, but we used vote by mail. And so I understand that it's perfectly safe. It's what we did most of our married life. I'm very comfortable with that. And I think that people are getting more comfortable with it. I was impressed with the system in Davidson County. I thought the Election Commission in Davidson County did a great job. I could track my ballot. I could track when I requested it. I could track when it went back to them online. It was fabulous. I think that people are becoming more accepting already. The question is going to be, is the legislature and the governor going to become more accepting so that we have a Secretary of State who is more accepting of it. Right now, Tennessee is actually one of the most difficult states to vote in. And we see a lot more voter suppression activity here than other states. And so we'd really have to build that out. And I think as we see what happens after the pandemic, we'll start working on that.
Mayor Campbell, what do you think?
Yeah, so I also agree that mail-in voting is something that we should look at. You know, anytime you increase voter turnout, I think you're creating opportunity for democracy to play its course. And I think the Republicans have been opposed to that because I think that it's probably something that doesn't favor them. I am concerned about election integrity in general. And that's actually ubiquitous, but certainly with the state of Tennessee, I worry about the issues that have been surrounding uh, the mail-in voting process, even within this election. But I do support mail-in voting. We've certainly seen that it's possible in other states. I'd focus more on obstacles to voting and removing them. Previous to this, mail-in voting was only available to people over 60. And, you know, voter ID laws disenfranchise people. You can use an NRA card to vote. And obviously, the voter suppression bill was horrible. So thank God it's been stayed by a court. So I'm a proponent of mail-in voting. I'm very concerned about process and how these votes are going to be counted and how we're going to, you know, maintain integrity in our elections. Thanks.
Thank you. If elected, you will be in the Democratic minority. What issues can you work on with Republicans on a bipartisan basis to actually get something done? Mayor Campbell, please take this one first.
Yeah, so that is a great question, and that is the question when I talk to, you know, hundreds of voters every day, and they say, well, you know, Steve Dickerson may be a Republican, but he's not a bad guy. What can you do in the super minority? And I think that we have to stop seeding that. I think we have to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work of changing our legislature, and not just relinquish ourselves to the fact that you know we have to have somebody in there representing at least some of our interests. We need to fight for all Tennesseans, and I have been able to do that in my city by working with Republicans to get things done for Oak Hill. I've worked with the state and I've worked with the federal government, and especially during this COVID crisis, it's been really, really important to be able to work across the aisle and to be able to, you know, speak Republican, as it were, so that we can get things done for our city and try and navigate the complicated bureaucratic processes of getting financial relief and infrastructure issues and things like that that are resulting, particularly now during this crisis. So I believe I am hopeful that that my background in working with Republicans across the aisle will be something that I can take to the legislature. I've already worked with the state legislature on several issues for Oak Hill and for the other satellite cities, particularly around the hall tax. It's so anyway, I think finding is something that we need to work.
Thank you, Mayor Campbell. What do you think, Kimi?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think that there are a lot of issues where we can work together. I certainly saw, as I said, a lot of movement toward, or some movement toward Medicaid expansion, and I'm very excited about that. I do think that the pandemic is going to lead Republicans in that direction. I think it's also going to lead constituents to demand that their senators and House members go in that direction. You know, prior to the pandemic, we had over 300,000 people who were the working poor who didn't have insurance and didn't qualify for Medicaid and or TennCare. Now that we're in the pandemic, you know, the numbers are exponential given the fact that people's insurance is almost always tied to their job, and people are losing their jobs so rapidly. So I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that, and I think it's going to become a financial economic necessity. And I think I've talked to Republicans, and I know that it's going to be something they're going to consider. Another issue I think we can work on quite well is I'm very focused also on environmental issues, our air and water quality. And those are issues that on the surface you might not think that Republicans would care about, but so many people across the political spectrum are engaged in outdoor activities in Tennessee. They are, hunters or fishermen, or they enjoy out hiking, camping, our waterways. And they're concerned as well with participating or protecting our air and water. They understand that it's a health issue. They understand that we have to protect these resources for us and for our children's health, but they're more focused on it in terms of that. And they understand it's an economic issue, that we have lots of tourism jobs based around the outdoors, and we also have the opportunity for building out renewable resource jobs. So there are very clear areas we can work with Republicans on, and that I'm very comfortable and happy to do that with.
Thank you. This next question is an interesting one. So what stood out to some of our viewers is that at least on one of your mailers, on both candidates, there were no people of color on the mailer. What impact do you think that has with constituents? Can you please take this first?
Me? Well, that's interesting, because actually on every mailer I've had, there have been people of color. And I know that because they're my family members. So I think that if that were truly the case, that would have an impact. I think you just have to look at the children in my mailers and you'll see that they are, in fact. And I think it is significant. I think, I hope that that's not the case. I was sort of careful about that. But I think that you'll see, I think it does have an impact. It speaks to the issue of, are we representing all members of our district? I'm a first generation American, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that it's important for us all to be represented. It's important for us all to be considered. And when I talk about looking at the issues through the lens of justice, that is literally what I'm talking about. When I think about how we're going to address, for instance, racism from the perspective of the legislature, it's not something we're going to undo in one legislative session, but it is something, but we can commit to looking at every law, every policy, every piece of legislation. We can look at it and say, how do we make sure this is not perpetuating institutional or systemic racism? How can we make sure this is not just not perpetuating, but making lives better? That we're doing things to make sure people are in a better position. So I understand that question. I respect that question. And if in fact I did do that, I am deeply sorry, because I'm using my family as the people on my on my brochures. and beyond the fact that COVID requires that, it's also because my cousins and nieces and nephews are frankly quite beautiful. And they're the people I want to use.
Thank you, Kimi.
Sure.
Thank you, Campbell.
Yeah, so that's also not true in my case. Vincent Dixie is supporting me and is on my mailer, and Black Lives Matter is very important to me and on my website. And I think it is a good question. I think that that we need to center voices, Black voices, people of color. And I really hope that this is not just another moment in the news cycle, and that we actually have meaningful change in the systemic racism that plagues every facet of our society. So yeah, I have endorsements from Senator Brenda Gilmore, Representative Vincent Dixie. We have had wonderful volunteers who've come to our campaign of color and of many ethnicities and color because of our beliefs, and because we support and lift up all voices and don't believe in discrimination of any sort for any heritable traits. And also I'll just go ahead and say the LGBT is supporting us, because she knows that I'm a passionate advocate for that. So I'm not sure where that came from, but we definitely are supporting Black Lives Matter and have Black people represented in our campaign.
Great. Well, I'm great to hear that from both of you. It sounds like you both are very committed to diversity, inclusive, and equity. What is your philosophy on equity and diversity? And what evidence do you have that you are connecting your philosophy to practice? Mayor Campbell, please take this one first.
I'm talking about it and I'm listening about it. It's important for us to listen. I coined a term, maybe it's been coined before. We don't need to listen to white people about issues of Black Lives Matter. We need to lift up Black voices. We have amazing leaders in our community who are already doing the hard work. I've worked with Gideon's Army, and they are doing incredible work with their violence interrupters, who are people from their community who are known to their community. Some of them have been incarcerated, who, you know, intervene in domestic situations. And, you know, I think criminal justice reform is something that is very important when addressing these issues. And not only that, it's so important for us to understand that it plagues every facet of our society. It's systemic for a reason. Our country is rooted in this dis-ease. It's a disease, and we have to start to look at how we can heal that, and we have to listen to Black voices in doing so. And then, you know, as far as equity in other areas, you know, I'm not happy with the way this state is treating women. And I'm really, really unhappy about the fetal heartbeat bill. I think that's a war on women. And I will stand up. And as to the question, what am I doing? You know, I wrote a letter to the editor stating that's unacceptable, that women will fight for their rights. And LGBTQ, and, you know, anybody who's marginalized, immigrant rights. I think it's very, very important for us to stop the slate of hate. Enough hate, you know. Let's start to love one another, support one another, and create systems that work for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Kimi.
So that's a really deeply personal question. I am, you may have heard of the YWCA's 21-day challenge. That is really interesting. It's a challenge that asks you to do daily exercises and meditations, readings, journaling, videos, dealing with different aspects of racism. And I'm going to talk about racism specifically. It's been very moving for me. It has been uncomfortable, as it should be. I think it will always be uncomfortable. And I think that anyone who says it isn't is not being honest with themselves. I find it to be, as I said, a very personal question, because this is something that I have struggled with and dealt with and tried to work in almost all of my life. As a director of admissions at a school, I committed to bringing in young people of color, whether they were from the area or not, just bringing in and supporting them in my community at the school. And it's something that I was very committed to. And when I did that, I saw that sometimes my views about what they needed were not in fact what they needed. And I learned so much from them. And I learned so much from them that most of them I'm still in touch with, and a great number of them are actually supporting my campaign, which makes me very proud and honored. But I've done that almost all my life, and certainly in my professional life. I worked with the Equity Alliance well, we were all volunteers at that point. Now, thankfully, Charlene and some of the people are getting paid. There's actually a paid staff. But I worked with Equity Alliance on the leadership team. I spent a lot of time advocating for young students who were particularly struggling and not having the support they needed in schools. As a counselor, that was something I dealt with quite a bit. My daughter graduated from a public school here in Nashville, House School in East Nashville, and it's a predominantly Black school. And so I understand the kids who are there, and I got to know them. And so it's a really personal question. How I connect it to my life and how I act out on it is sort of in my daily life. It's part of what I do daily. It's part of the struggle of every person, I think, on a daily basis.
Thank you, Kimi.
Sure.
Thank you.
I didn't know I'd ever done.
No, you're fine. All right, this is actually our last question before our closing statement. So Tennessee is in good financial shape right now as a low tax state. With tough times ahead, would you support budget cuts or higher taxes to balance the budget? Can you please take this one first?
Well, again, that's a hard question. Not deeply personal, but hard. I'm a believer in equitable spending and equitable actions by the state. I really believe that there are ways we can shift funds and do what we need to do. But even more than that, and I keep going back to this, we are sending $1.6 billion a year out of Tennessee because we have not taken on Medicaid expansion. That's absurd. If we're even talking about what we're going to do financially, the first thing we have to do is bring that money back, right? So as far as I'm concerned, before you have any conversations, you talk about bringing that money back to Tennessee, and then you see what you need to do.
All right, thank you. Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, so as a mayor, conservatism has been a big hallmark of my administration, and I really think it's not fair that Democrats get characterized as fiscally irresponsible or a tax and spend group, and I think we need to change that narrative. As an MBA, I believe in finding economic efficiencies, and I've been able to do that. I did that for my city when our greatest source of revenue, the hall tax, was being phased out. And there are ways to do it. You have to be smart about it, and you have to find opportunities. And so that's where legalization of marijuana is something to consider. That's where absolutely, I agree completely 100% with Kimi. It's ludicrous that we have left billions of dollars of support on the table by not adopting the ACA. We need to expand Medicaid, and we need to change that. And also, we need to legislate smart. So we need to do things and work on programs that are more efficient. For example, taking some of the money that we're putting into policing maybe and putting it into social programs and areas where we can actually lift all people up and prevent bad things from happening, oftentimes save us a lot of money. I believe a lot in prevention. I believe in social programs that prevent bad things from happening just as much as I believe in putting money into good things happening. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I think that there are actual efficiencies that we're not finding. And I also think that, yes, we're in good shape right now, but we're about to have some serious decisions to make because of COVID. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you both for answering questions tonight. We are going to move to closing statements. Kimi, since you went first last time for opening, Mayor Campbell, please go ahead with your closing.
Thank you so much for having us tonight, and thanks to everyone listening. This is such a wonderful opportunity to speak to you, and especially at this time when, you know, things are difficult to do in person, even though we're all sick of Zoom sessions. This is going to be a tough race and an expensive one. The Republicans' treatment of my friend Aaron in 2016 was brutal, but as a two-time candidate, I know how to run and win an election. I've been through 2 smear campaigns, and let me just tell you that wrangling with Tennessee Republicans is not for the faint of heart. Experience matters, and everyone here knows that a women's qualifications are held to a higher standard. It's not fair, but if we're going to change that narrative, we've got to get more women elected, and I am the woman that can win in the general. I hold an MBA from Vanderbilt. I'm a business executive, and I'm now in my second term as a mayor in this district. I've already been working hard for residents in this district. As I mentioned before, this is going to be a tough race and an expensive one, but if we're going to flip it, we're going to have to get everything right. And that starts with picking the right candidates. In 5 months of campaigning, I've raised more than my opponent has in a year. I'm the candidate that can win in November because I can run on my record of delivering results to my constituents in this district. I can build bipartisan coalitions, and I can raise the funds to get the job done. Together, we can flip this seat and get to work on issues that matter for Tennesseans. Please call me or text me if you have any questions or issues you'd like to discuss. My phone number is 615-438-6338. And vote for Heidi Campbell for Senate District 20. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Mayor Campbell. Kimi.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. We have seen time and again that what this extreme legislature will do to our state. They're decimating our public schools, blocking our health care. They're enabling racism, denying LGBTQ rights. They're eliminating women's reproductive rights. They're allowing the destruction of our environment. And all of these are justice issues that disproportionately affect Black and brown communities and poor communities. We must rise together. If we all rise together. We are in a position to make great changes now. The people rose up and fought for years to get that bust removed, and it finally happened. And we're in a position to do the same thing with the legislature. I am in this fight to win. I am the senator we need and the one who will fight every step of the way for you and with you. We need a champion for our public schools in the legislature. I am that champion. I have been in a classroom. I've worked with special ed. I've been a counselor. I've served on a school board. We need another strong voice in the Senate, fighting beside the hardworking Democrats for Medicaid expansion. I am that voice because I understand what it's like to not have insurance, and I understand what it's like to lose a godson to that crisis. We need an advocate for our environment, to protect our children's health, to grow our economy, and to preserve our beautiful state. I am that advocate. We need an ally for our Black brothers and sisters, our LGBTQ plus partners, our women's rights. We need a justice warrior, and I am that justice warrior because I have spent my adult life addressing these inequities both professionally and personally. Failure is not an option. If we win this seat, it is the beginning of taking back the Senate, and I will commit to you that I will work to help other Democrats get elected. I am the person who can beat Steve Dickerson. I have raised the same amount of money as my opponent, and we can start this process now. I have been endorsed by Mayor Carl Dean, and I'm very proud of it. I've been endorsed by the AFL-CIO, and I am extremely proud of that. I've been endorsed by Councilmember Russ Bradford and John Rutherford, Trustee Erica Gilmore. I've been endorsed by Jason Isbell and Ketch Secor of Old Crow Medicine Show, and I'm very proud of that, among other things. So I am the senator you need, and I want to work for you and with you. I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here tonight, and thank you to our viewers at home for tuning in. We have two really great candidates, so I know that they are not making this decision easy. So thank you for tuning in, and take care.
Thank you, Zaya.
Thank you, Zaya.